Now I have everything. You've lost.
The credit card statement sat on my desk like a loaded tool, the numbers glowing under my desk lamp at 2 in the morning. $7,000 at the Grand Harbor Resort and Spa. The same weekend, Vanessa claimed she was at a pharmaceutical conference in Albany. I'm Dr. Greg Harper, and I've spent 15 years diagnosing lies. Usually they come from patients claiming their back pain started just yesterday, when their MRI shows years of damage. Tonight, the lie came from my wife. The house creaked around me, that old Victorian settling into another restless night. Vanessa was upstairs, probably dreaming of whoever helped her spend my money at that couples retreat. The irony wasn't lost on me. I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for her betrayal. My phone buzzed, a text to Vanessa's number. Missing you already, beautiful. Can't wait for next time. A. She'd left her phone charging downstairs. Again. I screenshotted the message, added it to the folder I'd started 3 weeks ago. The folder that began with a simple observation. My wife of 18 years had suddenly developed an interest in yoga, new lingerie, and girls' nights that lasted until dawn. The front door opened with its familiar squeal. Vanessa's heels clicked across the hardwood, trying to be quiet and failing spectacularly. I minimized the banking website and opened a patient file, the picture of a dedicated doctor burning the midnight oil. Greg, you're still up? Her voice carried that artificial sweetness she used when she felt guilty. Mrs. Peterson's lab results came back concerning. Had to review everything. I didn't look up from the computer screen. How was the conference? She away that 14-hour workdays don't typically produce. Her hair had that just styled look, and her skin glowed with the kind of relaxation that comes from spa treatments and room service. Exhausting but productive. Learned about some new pills trials that could be game changers. She moved behind my chair, her hands finding my shoulders. You should come to bed. In a minute, I pulled up another file. By the way, your phone's been buzzing all evening. Might be important. I felt her tense. Probably just Melanie. You know how she gets after a few drinks. Melanie, her best friend and enabler, who worked in HR at Vanessa's biotech company. The same Melanie who'd called the house last weekend asking if Vanessa was feeling better, when Vanessa had told me she was spending the day with Melanie shopping. I'll be up soon, I said, finally turning to meet her eyes. They were bright, happy, guilty. Just need to finish this. She kissed my forehead, her lips lingering a moment too long. The kiss of someone trying to convince herself she wasn't a complete monster. After her footsteps faded upstairs, I opened a new browser window and searched for Aiden Brooks, Vanessa's work husband, as she'd started calling him 6 months ago. The smooth-talking sales rep who'd been mentioned in more dinner conversations than our own children lately. His LinkedIn profile showed a man in his early 40s, all white teeth and expensive suits. The kind of guy who drove a Tesla and wore cologne that cost more than most people's rent. His relationship status said single, but his recent photos showed him at the Grand Harbor Resort. The same resort, the same weekend. I opened my patient database and typed his name. 3 weeks ago, he'd come to my practice for STD testing, standard procedure for someone starting a new relationship, or someone whose current relationship had become complicated. The results had come back 2 days ago. I'd been meaning to call him. HIV positive. I stared at the screen, my medical training warring with something darker. As a doctor, I had a duty to inform patients of their results. As a husband, I had a duty to protect my wife. But what duty did I have to a wife who was spending my money to sleep with other men? My phone rang. The caller ID showed my practice's after-hours line. Dr. Harper. Greg, it's Frankie. My nurse's gravelly voice carried concern. Sorry to bother you, but we've got a situation. That Brooks guy, he's been calling every hour since 5 p.m., demanding his test results. Says it's urgent. Frankie Martinez had been my nurse for 8 years. She was street smart, loyal, and had an uncanny ability to read people. She also knew everything that happened in our small New England town before it hit the gossip mill. What kind of urgent? The panic kind. Also, Greg, I saw your wife at the Gavel tonight. She wasn't alone. The Gavel was the upscale bar where our town's professionals went to see and be seen. It wasn't the kind of place you went for a quiet drink after a long business trip. Thanks, Frankie. I'll handle the Brooks situation in the morning. Greg, be careful. Whatever's going on, just be careful. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my office, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, Vanessa was probably already asleep, exhausted from her performance. Tomorrow she'd wake up refreshed, shower off the scent of her lover, and play the devoted wife over coffee and toast. But tonight, I had work to do. I pulled out a legal pad and started making lists. Bank statements to review, phone records to request, a private investigator to hire, my lawyer's number to add to my contacts, and Aiden Brooks' test results to deliver. At 3 a.m., I finally headed upstairs. Vanessa was curled on her side, her phone charging on the nightstand. I slipped into bed beside her, close enough to smell another man's cologne still clinging to her hair. She stirred slightly, murmuring something that sounded like, Aiden. I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would be very interesting. The next morning brought the kind of crisp October air that made New England postcards famous. I was scrambling eggs when Vanessa floated into the kitchen, already dressed in her power suit and ready to conquer the biotech world. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Mrs. Peterson's results. I slid eggs onto her plate. And about that bill from Grand Harbor Resort. Her coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. What bill? The $7,000 bill on our joint credit card. From last weekend, when you were supposedly in Albany. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the antique clock her mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. Vanessa set down her mug with deliberate care. I can explain. I'm listening. She sat across from me, her expression shifting civil included 23%. She used during board meetings. The Albany conference was canceled at the last minute. Melanie suggested we take a girls' weekend instead, decompress from the stress at work. I didn't want to worry you with the expense. Melanie, I took a bite of eggs. The same Melanie who called here Saturday asking if you were feeling better? A flush crept up her neck. She must have been confused. Or you were confused about which lie you told whom. I stood carrying my plate to the sink. By the way, your friend Aiden has been calling the office. Something about urgent test results. The color drained from her face. Aiden? Aiden Brooks, your work husband. Tall guy, drives a Tesla, apparently enjoys couples spas. I turned to face her. He came to my practice 3 weeks ago for STD testing. Seems he was starting a new relationship and wanted to be responsible. Greg, the results came back positive. HIV. I'm legally obligated to inform him and medically obligated to advise anyone who might have been exposed to get tested immediately. She stood so quickly, her chair scraped against the hardwood. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Because I'm looking at receipts for romantic dinners, couples massages, and a champagne package for 2. Either you've developed multiple personalities, or you've been lying to me for months. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The display showed Aiden with a heart emoji. We both stared at it. Answer it, I said. Greg, please. Answer it or I will. Unchecked the phone, declining the call. This is insane. You're my husband. You're supposed to trust me. Trust is earned, and you've been spending our money to sleep with a man who could end you. Blindness. The words hung between us like a death sentence. Vanessa's face went through a series of emotions. Denial, anger, fear, and finally something that looked like calculation. I want a divorce, she said. Good, so do I. I pulled on my jacket. But first, you need to see a doctor, today. Because if Aiden Brooks infected you, and you infected me, we're going to have bigger problems than asset division. I left her standing in the kitchen, her perfect composure finally cracking. The drive to my practice took me through the center of town, past the white steepled church where we'd been married, past the elementary school where our kids had learned to read, past the coffee shop where we used to meet for lunch when we still enjoyed each other's company. 18 years of marriage, reduced to credit card statements and STD results. Frankie was already at the office, reviewing the day's schedule. She looked up when I walked in, her dark eyes full of concern. You look like heck, Doc. Feel worse. What's the situation with Brooks? He's called 6 times since I got here at 7. Last message said he'd be here when we opened, demanding his results. She handed me a stack of messages. Also, your wife called, wants to schedule an emergency appointment. Book her for this afternoon. Full panel. Greg, Frankie's voice softened. What's going on? Breastfeeding. I'd known Frankie since she was a teenager, had hired her straight out of nursing school when everyone else thought she was too young, too rough around the edges. She'd proven them wrong every day since and had become more than an employee. She was family. My marriage is over. The question now is whether it's going to end me. Respond, the front door chimed. Aiden Brooks strode in like he owned the place, all nervous energy and expensive cologne. Up close, he was everything his photos promised, handsome, confident, and completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. Dr. Harper? Thank God. I need my test results. It's urgent. Of course, Mr. Brooks. Please, come into my office. I led him down the hallway, past examination rooms filled with the tools of healing, into my private office where I delivered thousands of diagnoses over the years. Good news, bad news, life-changing news. This fell into the last category. He sat across from my desk, leg bouncing with anxiety. Look, Doc, I know patient confidentiality and all that, but I really need to know. I've got situations that require immediate attention. I understand completely. I opened his file. Mr. Brooks, I'm afraid your HIV test came back positive. The words hit him like a physical blow. His face went white, then gray, then green. That's impossible. I'm careful. I always use protection. HIV can be transmitted even with protection, though it's less common. The important thing now is to get you connected with a specialist and begin treatment immediately. He stopped, his hand covering his mouth. You've been physically intimate, I understand. Anyone you've been close with in the past 6 months needs to be tested immediately. He looked up at me with the expression of a man watching his life burn down. Dr. Harper, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Your wife, Vanessa, does she know? I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Mr. Brooks, are you asking me if my wife knows about your diagnosis? I'm asking if she knows about us. He hung in the air between us. I'd expected it, prepared for it, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. She knows now, I said quietly. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked Main Street. This is a disaster. My career, her marriage, everything we've worked for. Wherever you've worked for? I kept my voice level, professional. Mr. Brooks, you've been sleeping with another man's wife, using his money to pay for hotel rooms. What exactly did you think you were working toward? He spun around, and for a moment I saw something ugly in his expression. You don't understand. Vanessa and we have something real, something you obviously couldn't give her. What I couldn't give her was HIV. The words hit their target. He sank back into his chair, the fight going out of him. Mr. Brooks, I'm going to give you the name of an excellent infectious disease specialist in Boston. You need to call them today. And you need to inform anyone you've been intimate with that they need testing, including your wife, especially my wife. I wrote the referral, handed it across the desk. Our fingers brushed as he took it, and I felt nothing but pity for him. He was just another patient now, another person whose choices had led them to my office, seeking salvation. Dr. Harper, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. Mr. Brooks, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. I've learned that sorry doesn't cure diseases, but honesty might prevent them from spreading. Okay, after he left, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the town I'd called home for 2 decades. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably calling Aiden, trying to figure out damage control. Somewhere out there, their friends were going about their normal lives, unaware that the Harper marriage had just become ground zero for a very different kind of epidemic. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. We need to talk. Concord, I typed back. We just did. See you at 3 for your appointment. The unthinkable the morning stretched ahead of me, filled with routine appointments and ordinary problems. Mrs. Peterson's concerning lab results, Tommy Martinez's broken wrist from skateboarding, Sarah Chen's pregnancy checkup. Normal people with normal problems, living normal lives. I envied them all. By 3 o'clock, word had spread through our small town's gossip network like wildfire. Frankie fielded 3 calls from concerned friends asking about Vanessa's emergency appointment, and Mrs. Wilkes, our 70-year-old neighbor, had already stopped by with a casserole, in case anyone was feeling under the weather. In a town of 12,000 people, secrets had the lifespan of mayflies. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, her usual punctuality now feeling like a performance. She changed from her power suit into jeans and a sweater, as if casual clothes could somehow make this appointment less significant. "Mrs. Harper," Frankie said with professional coolness, "the doctor will see you now." The examination room felt smaller with Vanessa in it, the familiar space suddenly charged with 18 years of shared history and recent betrayal. She sat on the edge of the examination table, her legs swinging slightly like a nervous child. "I scheduled you for a complete STD panel," I said, pulling on latex gloves. "Lab work, cultures, the full spectrum." "Greg, can we please talk about this like adults?" "We are. I'm your doctor right now, and you're my patient. Nothing more." I drew samples with the same clinical detachment I'd used on thousands of other patients. Labeled the vials with her name and date of birth, information I'd once known by heart in a completely different context. "Results will be back in 3 to 5 days, I said, removing my gloves. "I'll call with the results." "That's it? You're not going to yell at me, throw things, demand explanations?" I sat down across from her, the desk creating a barrier that felt both professional and necessary. "Vanessa, I've spent the morning researching divorce attorneys. This afternoon I'm meeting with a private investigator. Tonight I'm changing the locks on the house. What would you like me to explain?" Her composure finally cracked. 18 years, Greg, 18 years of marriage, and you're throwing it all away over a mistake? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is double booking appointments. What you did was a series of deliberate choices that put both our lives at risk. I never meant for it to happen. Aiden and we were just friends at first. He understood the pressure I was under at work, the stress of the new product launch. You were always busy with patients, never available when I needed support. So you decided to find support in his bed. Safeguards. She flinched. It wasn't like that. Championships. Then what was it like, Vanessa? Help me understand how spending $7,000 on a romantic weekend with another man was about needing support. Tears started flowing. The kind of tears that had once moved me to comfort her, to promise that whatever was wrong, we'd fix it together. Now they just looked like manipulation. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. I'll cut off all contact with Aiden." "You'll cut off contact with the man who might take a big road set? You shouldn't the man have compact them. You'll cut off contact with the man who might have given you a fatal disease. How generous." "The HIV test could be wrong. False positives happen." "They do. But credit card statements don't lie. Hotel receipts don't lie. And the photos on his social media don't lie." Her face went white. "What photos?" I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd taken in this next as 2014 one today. Aiden at the Grand Harbor Resort. Aiden raising a champagne glass and a toast. Aiden's reflection in a mirror, with a woman's hand visible on his chest, wearing the bracelet I'd given Vanessa for our anniversary. "You've been documenting your affair on Instagram. Did you think I'd never see them?" Psychologist, she stared at the phone screen like it was a snake. "Greg, please, I love you. I've always loved you. This thing with Aiden, it was just excitement, novelty. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough to risk our marriage, our health, our children's respect. The kids don't know." "They will. Sophie's coming home from college this weekend. Ethan's been asking why you're never home for dinner anymore. What exactly did you plan to tell them?" She slid off the examination table, moving toward me with the same calculated grace she used in boardrooms. "We don't have to tell them anything. This can stay between us. We can work through it privately." "Vanessa, stop." But she kept coming, reaching for me with hands that had touched another man, lips that had kissed someone else, eyes that had looked at Aiden Brooks with the love and desire that once belonged to me. "Don't touch me." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they stopped her cold. She stood there, arms half extended, looking like she'd been slapped. "You won't even let me touch you? You might be infected with HIV. You've been sleeping with another man for months. Why would I let you touch me?" The clinical reality of it seemed to hit her for the first time. She wasn't just a wife who'd made a mistake, she was a potential disease vector, a walking reminder of every choice that had led us to this sterile room, these latex gloves, this professional distance between people who used to share everything. "I'll get tested," she said quietly. "I'll do whatever you want, but please don't give up on us." "I'm not giving up on us, Vanessa. You already did that." For closure after she left, I sat alone in the examination room, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Vital sign cuffs and otoscopes, tongue depressors and reflex hammers. Everything needed to diagnose what was wrong with the human body. If only there were tools to diagnose what was wrong with the human heart. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my daughter's number. "Hey, Sophie." "Dad?" "Mom called me. She's really upset about something. She said you two are having problems, but she wouldn't tell me what kind of problems." Sophie was 20, a junior at Boston University studying pre-law. She had her mother's intelligence and her grandfather's sense of justice, which meant she could smell BS from 3 states away. "We are having problems, honey. Serious ones." "Are you getting divorced?" The question hung there, waiting for an answer that would change everything for our family. Sophie and Ethan had grown up in a stable home, with parents who fought occasionally but always worked things out. They'd never had to choose sides or split holidays or explain to friends why Daddy lived in an apartment across town. "Probably." "Oh, Dad," her voice broke a little. "I'm so sorry. What happened?" "Your mother made some choices that I can't live with. That's all I can say right now." "Is there someone else?" My daughter, the future lawyer, cutting straight to the heart of it. "Yes. Unborn, I'm coming home this weekend. Don't make any big decisions until I get there, okay?" "Sophie, this isn't something you can fix." "Maybe not, but I can be there for you, both of you." After we hung up, I called Ethan at his high school. As a senior, he had study hall last period and could usually take calls. "Dad, what's up?" "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come straight home after school?" "Sure. Is everything okay?" "We'll talk when you get home." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine appointments and ordinary problems. But underneath it all, I could feel the foundation of my life shifting, cracking, preparing to collapse entirely. At 6 o'clock, I drove home to the Victorian house that had been our sanctuary for 15 years. The place where we'd raised our children, hosted dinner parties, celebrated holidays and anniversaries. The place where Vanessa had been planning her exit strategy while I worked late shifts to pay for her betrayal. Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, tall and lanky at 17, looking more like me every day. He had my dark hair and serious expression, but his mother's quick wit and social ease. "Dad, you look terrible." "Thanks. That's exactly what every middle-aged man wants to hear." "Sorry, but seriously, what's going on? Mom's been crying all day and she won't tell me why." Stringfield, I sat across from him at the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family, where homework had been completed and arguments settled and dreams shared. "Your mother and I are getting divorced." He stared at me for a long moment, processing the information. "Because?" "Because she's been having an affair." "Mom?" His voice cracked with disbelief.
"Mom's cheating on you?"
"For several months, yes." "With who?" "Reds, someone from her work." Ethan was quiet for a while, staring at his hands. Finally, "Are you okay?" "No, but I will be." "Is she Mayhome favorite now?" "Is she one of the going back to the first part?" "No, but I will be." "Is she moving out?" "We haven't worked out the details yet, but yes, probably." "Can I stay with you?" Pledged, the question hit me harder than anything else that had happened in the past 24 hours. My son, choosing sides in a war he didn't start. "Ethan, you don't have to choose." "Yes, I do, and I choose you." That night, after Ethan went to his room to process the news, I sat in my home office surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal. Credit card statements, phone records, social media screenshots, the paper trail of a marriage's destruction. Tomorrow, I would meet with the private investigator. Tomorrow, I would start the legal process that would divide our assets, our debts, our children's lives. Tomorrow, I would begin the work of rebuilding from the ruins of 18 years. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for what we'd lost, what we'd never been, what we'd never be again. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows of our old house, and I wondered if Vanessa was lying awake somewhere, thinking about the life she'd thrown away for a few months of excitement with a man who might have ended her. Somehow I doubted it. The private investigator's office sat above a Chinese restaurant on Main Street, the kind of place you'd walk past 1,000 times without noticing. Jack Sullivan was exactly what Central Casting would order for a small-town PI. Rumpled suit, coffee-stained tie, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. Dr. Harper, he gestured to a chair across from his desk. Frankie Martinez recommended me, said you might need some help with a delicate situation. I handed him the folder I'd compiled. My wife's having an affair. I need documentation for divorce proceedings. He flipped through the evidence, credit card statements, phone records, social media screenshots. This is pretty comprehensive. What else do you need from me? I want to know everything. How long it's been going on, where they meet, who knows about it. I want to know if there are others, and I want to know what she's planning. Planning? Unless, my wife's not stupid, Mr. Sullivan. She's a biotech executive who's used to managing complex situations. She's not going to just roll over in a divorce. She's planning something. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You sound like a man who's thought this through. I'm a doctor. I believe in thorough diagnosis before treatment. What kind of treatment are you considering? Treatment. I want her out of my life with minimal damage to my children and my practice. He nodded. I can work with that. My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. I'll need a $2,000 retainer. I wrote the check. The first of many expenses in the dissolution of my marriage. One more thing, Dr. Harper. In my experience, when marriages blow up this spectacularly, they tend to get messy. You sure you want to go down this road? Mr. Sullivan, my wife spent months lying to me, stealing from me, and exposing me to potentially fatal diseases. The road's already been chosen. The attorney, I met with Patricia Kellerman, the best divorce attorney in 3 counties. Her office overlooked the town common, where tourists came to photograph our picturesque New England charm, unaware of the drama playing out behind our perfect facades. Dr. Harper, I've reviewed the materials you sent over. You have a strong case for adultery, which is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. Patricia was in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made opposing counsel nervous. She'd handled my colleague's divorce 3 years earlier and had a reputation for being thorough, aggressive, and expensive. What am I looking at in terms of asset division? That depends on several factors: how long you've been married, what assets were acquired during the marriage, whether she contributed to building your practice. The good news is that adultery can affect alimony calculations. And the bad news? She's going to fight back. Women in her position usually do. She'll claim emotional abandonment, say you were never home, paint herself as the neglected wife who made a mistake. McConnell, what about the children? So Sophie's over 18, so custody isn't an issue, so the court will consider his preferences heavily. From what you've told me, that shouldn't be a problem. We spent 2 hours going through financials, asset lists, and strategy. By the time I left her office, I had a clear picture of what the next year would look like. Expensive, ugly, and necessary. That evening, Sophie arrived home from college, her Honda Civic packed with laundry and textbooks. She hugged me tight in the driveway, and I could feel her tension. Where's Mom? She's staying at Melanie's for now. Have you talked to her? Only about practical things, appointments, schedules. We went inside, where Ethan was waiting in the first their treat and 15% that around. We went inside where Ethan was larked from a bowl. Sophie looked around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. The family photos, the wedding pictures, the accumulated evidence of a life built together. This is so weird, she said. I keep expecting Mom to come down the stairs complaining about work or asking if anyone started dinner. She might still do that, Ethan said. Dad changed the locks, but she's probably got a lawyer working on it. You changed the locks? Sophie looked at me with surprise. She forfeited her right to come and go as she pleased when she started bringing her boyfriend to our bed. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was tired of protecting everyone else's feelings while mine were being systematically destroyed. Dad, Sophie's voice was gentle. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry, but she's still our mom. And I'm still your father. The father who's been working 60-hour weeks while your mother spent our money on hotel rooms with her boyfriend. How long has it been going on? Ethan asked. At least 6 months, probably longer. Do we know him? Sophie asked. Aiden Brooks. He works at her company. The guy with the Tesla? Ethan's voice carried disgust. I met him at that company picnic last summer. Total douche. Magically, I said automatically, then realized how ridiculous that sounded given the circumstances. Sophie curled up in her old spot on the couch, the same place she'd sat for homework help and heart-to-heart talks throughout high school. What happens now? Now we figure out how to be a family without her. She wants to come home, Sophie said quietly. She called me 3 times today, crying, saying she made a terrible mistake and wants to fix things. Some things can't be fixed. Klingad, I know what she did was awful. But 18 years of marriage, that has to count for something. Discharged, I sat down across from my children, looking at their faces. Sophie's earnest concern, Ethan's quiet anger, both of them trying to process the destruction of the only stable home they'd ever known. Let me ask you something, I said. If someone came to you and said they've been lying to you for months, stealing your money, exposing you to diseases, and sleeping with someone else, but they were really sorry and wanted another chance, what would you do? I'd tell him to go to heck, Ethan said immediately. Ethan, Sophie shot him a look. It's not that simple. Why not? She cheated. She lied. She chose some random guy over Dad, over us, over everything we built as a family. Why should that be complicated? Because she's our mother, and people make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, I said. This was a choice. Multiple choices, made over months, each one a decision to put her own desires ahead of our family's well-being. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Harper, this is Aiden Brooks. We need to talk. It's important. I showed the text to Sophie and Ethan. Are you going to respond? Sophie asked. What could he possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? Maybe he wants to apologize, she suggested. Maybe he wants to warn you about something, Ethan said, his voice darker. I typed back, we have nothing to discuss. The response came immediately. It's about Vanessa. She's planning something. You need to know. I stared at the screen, remembering Sullivan's warning about things getting messy. What does it say? Sophie asked. I showed them. You have to meet with him, Ethan said. If Mom's planning something, you need to know what it is. I'm not taking advice from the man who destroyed my marriage. You're not taking advice, Sophie said. You're gathering intelligence. Know your enemy, right? The phrase hit me like a cold slap. When had my wife become my enemy? But as I looked at my children's faces, I realized they were right. Whatever Vanessa was planning, I needed to be prepared. I typed, tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. Thank you, came the immediate reply. That night I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with Vanessa for 15 years, staring at the ceiling and wondering what fresh heck tomorrow would bring. Outside, the October wind howled through the bare branches, and I thought about how quickly a life could change. 24 hours ago, I'd been a married man with a successful practice and a stable family. Tonight, I was a soon-to-be divorced father, preparing to meet with my wife's lover to discuss her plans for my destruction. Sometimes life moves so fast, you could barely keep up with your own disasters. Aiden Brooks looked like heck when he walked into my office the next afternoon. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders and darting eyes of a man who'd seen his future and found it wanting. Dr. Harper, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. He sat across from my desk, the same chair where he'd received his HIV diagnosis just days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Vanessa's planning to destroy you, he said without preamble. I assumed as much. What's her strategy? She's going to claim you've been harmful, emotionally, maybe physically. She's been documenting things, taking pictures of bruises that she says you caused, recording conversations where she claims you threatened her. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting. And there's so major world and shit that I'm suring research. Interesting. The blood should be in both in the major shitting. Maybe that she made their good self. I leaned back in this chair, plotting the blessed than once general nothing, but she's been well out of this shit. I leaned back in this chair. She sent theocratic the front out to her. I leaned back in the results. She said you only have a community. I leaned back in the moment. I running conversations where she know. Interesting, since I've never laid a hand on her, and our conversations have been remarkably civil, considering the circumstances. The bruises are from our activities. She likes it rough sometimes, but she's going to say they're from you. And the recordings? Edited. She's been baiting you, trying to get you to say something threatening, then cutting out the context. Why are you telling me this? He ran his hands through his hair, looking older than his 42 years. Because I'm dying, Dr. Harper. The HIV is just the beginning. I've got complications, opportunistic infections. My immune system is shot. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I considered the question. You're a human being facing a terminal diagnosis. Mean I forgive you for what you did to my family. Vanessa doesn't know how sick I am. She thinks we're going to ride off into the sunset together once she gets half your assets in the divorce. And you're having second thoughts about that plan? I'm having second thoughts about everything. He leaned forward. Dr. Harper, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to understand something. Vanessa isn't the woman you married. Maybe she never was. She's calculating, manipulative, and she doesn't care who gets hurt as long as she gets what she wants. Including you? Especially me. When she finds out I'm dying, I'll become a liability, someone who knows too much about her plans. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. As a doctor, I'd learned to read people, to spot the tells that indicated lying or omission. Aiden looked genuinely frightened. What exactly is she planning? She's going to file for divorce first, claiming misuse and emotional trauma. She's got Melanie and some other friends ready to testify about your controlling behavior and her fear for her safety. She's going to ask for the house, alimony, and half your practice. She can ask for whatever she wants. That doesn't mean she'll get it. She's also planning to file a complaint with the medical board, claiming you violated patient confidentiality when you told her about my diagnosis. That stopped me cold. A medical board complaint could destroy my career, even if it was ultimately unfounded. The investigation alone would be expensive and time-consuming, and the publicity could ruin my reputation in a small town where trust was everything. That's a serious accusation. She knows. She's counting on you never saw. And she shined bolden and you put in something like could extroin to me because she knows. She's counting on you being too worried about your career to fight back aggressively. And what do you get out of warning me? Maybe I sleep better at night knowing I did one decent thing before I die. I looked at this man who'd helped destroy my marriage, who was now offering to help me save what was left of my life. The situation was so surreal, I almost laughed. What kind of evidence do you have? He pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages, text conversations where she talks about her plans, recordings of phone calls where she discusses strategy with Melanie, photos she took of herself with makeup to simulate bruises, practicing her victim act. Why would you record her? In screen, I've been in sales for 20 years, Dr. Harper. I always keep records of important conversations. He transferred the files to a flash drive, handed it across the desk. Everything's on there. Use it however you want. What do you want in return? Nothing. I'm going to be dead. But I always want to fit her off, just to change her more. She's not important faith, but I don't fin it. Nothing. I'm going to be dead in 6 months. What could I possibly want? I sat alone with the flash drive, weighing my options. I could ignore it, pretend the meeting never happened, and face whatever Vanessa threw at me with clean hands. Or I could use the information to protect myself and my children from a woman who was apparently willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. I plugged in the drive. The first file was a text conversation between Vanessa and Melanie. The bruise makeup looks really convincing. I should have been an actress. Melanie. Just remember to take photos from different angles. Make it look like a pattern of misuse. Vanessa. Greg's going to be so shocked when I file first. He thinks he's so smart with his little investigation. What about the medical board complaint? Vanessa. That's my nuclear option. If he fights too hard, I'll destroy his career. Breached. I scrolled through dozens of similar messages, each one revealing a level of calculation and malice I'd never suspected in the woman I'd married. This wasn't a wife who'd made a mistake. This was a predator who'd been planning my destruction for months. The recordings were even worse. Vanessa's voice discussing strategy with Melanie like they were planning a corporate takeover. Unmistake is to make him look like the aggressor. Men always lose in divorce court when there's misuse involved. I just need to be convincing. What if he has evidence of the affair? So what? Adultery is just grounds for divorce. Misuse is grounds for criminal charges. I listened to my wife of 18 years calmly discussing how to frame me for crimes I'd never committed, how to destroy my reputation and career, how to turn my own children against me. The woman in those recordings was a stranger. That evening, I called Patricia Kellerman. I need to see you tomorrow morning, emergency session. What's happened? Wife's legal strategy. We need to adjust our approach. What kind of intelligence? The kind that changes everything. Next morning, I sat in Patricia's office with the flash drive and a printed transcript of the most damaging conversations. Jesus Christ, she muttered, reading through the messages. She's planning to commit perjury, file false police reports, and make fraudulent complaints to the medical board. Can we use this? Absolutely. This is evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. We can file a preemptive motion, get ahead of her accusations. What about the source? The information comes from her lover, a dying man with nothing to lose and a guilty conscience. That actually makes him more credible, not less. We spent 3 hours crafting a strategy that would turn Vanessa's own plan against her. By the time I left Patricia's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days, hope. That afternoon, I called Sophie and Ethan into my office at home. I need to show you something, I said, handing them printed excerpts from the most relevant conversations. But I want you to understand that this is going to be hard to read. The couch, Sophie reading aloud while Ethan looked over her shoulder. I watched their faces change as they processed their mother's words, saw the moment when shock gave way to anger, then to something harder. She was going to lie about you hitting her? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. According to this, yes. And get you in trouble with your medical license? That was the plan. The window. I can't believe this. I mean, I knew she cheated, but this is evil. She's still your mother, I said, though the words felt hollow. No, Sophie said firmly. Our mother wouldn't do this. Our mother wouldn't try to destroy our father with lies and fake evidence. I don't know who this woman is, but she's not our mother. That night, as I prepared for what would undoubtedly be the fight of my life, I realized that Vanessa had made a crucial miscalculation. She'd assumed I would be passive, that I would take whatever punishment she decided to inflict in order to avoid conflict. She'd forgotten that I was a doctor, trained to diagnose problems and treat them aggressively when necessary. And she was definitely a problem that required aggressive treatment. Vanessa filed for divorce on a Thursday morning, accompanied by a restraining order petition claiming I had been physically and emotionally harmful throughout our marriage. By noon, the local courthouse was buzzing with news that Dr. Greg Harper had been accused of domestic violence. I was seeing patients when Patricia called. They moved fast, she said. Emergency hearing this afternoon at 2 o'clock. She's asking for exclusive use of the marital home and temporary alimony. And the restraining order? Windshield. Temporary order granted based on her affidavit. You can't go within 500 feet of her or contact her directly. Fingered, I felt the walls closing in, exactly as Vanessa had planned. In one morning, she'd painted me as a threatening figure and positioned herself as the victim. If I hadn't had Aiden's intelligence, I would have been completely blindsided. Patricia, it's time to play our cards. All of them? Every single one. The courthouse hearing was standing room only, which was unusual for a domestic relations proceeding. Word had spread through town that one of their most respected doctors was being accused of beating his wife. I could feel the stares and whispers as I walked in with Patricia. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, Marcus Webb, a flashy lawyer from Boston who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She was dressed conservatively, makeup applied to emphasize the fake bruises she'd created, playing her role to perfection. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. We're here on an emergency petition for a restraining order and temporary support. Mrs. Harper, your attorney may proceed. Webb stood up, all righteous indignation. Your Honor, my client has endured years of escalating misuse at the hands of her husband. Dr. Harper used his position of authority and his medical knowledge to control and intimidate my client, culminating in physical violence when she finally found the courage to seek help. He presented photos of Vanessa's fake bruises, a carefully edited recording of one of our conversations, and testimony from Melanie about my controlling behavior. Mrs. Harper lives in fear, Webb concluded. She needs the protection of this court and the financial support necessary to rebuild her life. Jugged at the evidence, then at me. Dr. Harper, how do you respond to these allegations? Patrick stood up. Your Honor, we deny these allegations completely. Moreover, we have evidence that Mrs. Harper has committed perjury in her affidavit and has conspired to defraud this court. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Webb jumped to his feet. Objection! These are serious accusations without foundation. Your Honor, Patricia continued, we have recordings of Mrs. Harper discussing how to fake evidence of misuse, text messages detailing her plan to frame my client, and photographic evidence of her creating fake bruises with makeup. She handed the flash drive to the court clerk. We also have evidence that Mrs. Harper has been engaged in an extramarital affair for months, using marital assets to fund her relationship. Judge Morrison studied the materials for several minutes while the courtroom with, Mrs. Harper, did you create fake bruises for the purpose of this proceeding? Your Honor, It's a simple question. Did you use makeup to create the appearance of injuries that didn't exist? Webb whispered frantically in her ear, but she was trapped. The evidence was overwhelming. Your Honor, I may have enhanced some existing marks. Enhanced? Judge Morrison's voice carried the weight of 20 years on the bench. Mrs. Harper, you've submitted photographic evidence to this court under oath. Are you telling me this evidence is fabricated? Not fabricated, just clarified. Counselor, I suggest you have a serious conversation with your client about the penalties for perjury. He denied the restraining order petition and scheduled a full hearing for the following week. As we left the courthouse, I could see Vanessa arguing with Webb in the parking lot, her perfect victim act finally cracking under pressure. That went better than expected, Patricia said. It's not over. She'll regroup and come back harder. Well, I was right. That evening, Sophie called me in tears. Dad, Mom has been calling me all day saying you've been planning this for months, that you manipulated some sick man into lying about her. She says you're trying to destroy her career and reputation. What do you think? Think she's desperate and scared, and desperate people do stupid things. The next morning brought a new crisis. The medical board had received a complaint alleging that I'd violated patient confidentiality by discussing Aiden Brooks' HIV status with my wife. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the board's investigator, called to schedule an interview. Dr. Harper, you understand this is a serious allegation. If substantiated, it could result in suspension or revocation of your license. I understand completely. I also have evidence that this complaint was filed as part of a conspiracy to intimidate me during divorce proceedings. That's a serious counter-allegation. I have serious evidence. We scheduled the interview for the following week, giving me time to prepare a comprehensive defense. But the damage was already being done. 3 patients canceled appointments, and I could see the doubt in people's eyes when I walked through town. Vanessa was systematically destroying my reputation, just as she'd planned. That weekend, Ethan came to me with news that changed everything. Dad, I've been thinking about what Mom said, about you manipulating Aiden Brooks into lying. What about it? She's right about one thing. He is dying. I looked him up online. He's been posting on social media about his diagnosis, his treatment, his prognosis. Okay. But here's the thing. He was posting about being HIV positive 6 months ago, long before Mom's affair started. Checking, I stared at my son, processing the implications. Are you sure? Pazza charged everything. I screenshot everything. Mom didn't catch HIV from him. She knew he was positive when she started sleeping with him. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Vanessa hadn't been the victim of an unfortunate circumstance. She'd knowingly engaged in risky behavior, then exposed me to potential infection without my knowledge or consent. That was attempted homicide. I called Patricia immediately. This changes everything, she said after I explained. If she knowingly exposed you to HIV, that's aggravated assault in this state. We're talking potential criminal charges. I want her arrested. Greg, slow down. I've seen these charges thrown around more often than you'd think. Think about this carefully. Once we go criminal, there's no going back. Your children will have to watch their mother get arrested, possibly go to prison. Luckily, it's Sophie and Ethan who were listening to every word. They both nodded. "Do it," Sophie said. She made her choices. Monday morning, I walked into the district attorney's office with Patricia and a folder full of evidence. By Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa Harper was under arrest for aggravated assault and conspiracy to commit fraud. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Prominent doctor's wife arrested in bizarre revenge plot. As I watched Vanessa being led away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was over, and I'd won. But the victory felt hollow as I realized that in saving my life, I'd had to destroy the mother of my children and the woman I'd once loved more than anything in the world. Sometimes winning and losing look exactly the same.